Hello everyone, greetings from Denver, Colorado. My name is Taylor and I will be your discussion lead this week for Module 5, Agenda Setting. So this video is about my reflections from this week's readings, some of what I think are the important takeaways for the public administration field, and some discussion questions to take us through the week. So I think that the ways in which our different texts approach the subject of policy agenda setting are varied. Beginning with the Birkeland text, we get an overview to a few different agenda setting theories. So we have the pluralism approach and the elite theory. And those definitions you can find on page 200 of the 4th edition text. I think that the distinction between the two approaches is significant because both are at play in the United States simultaneously. One of my discussion questions asks to analyze these two schools of thought and to think of which theory you think dominates U.S. political culture right now and to provide some examples. So I think that the Birkeland text presents most of its material through an elite theory lens. I believe he does this through his use of vocab. I noticed a lot of words like compete and fight and conflict, win and lose, prevail and fail. So he definitely does not shy away from the fact that agenda setting can oftentimes be perceived as a zero-sum game in which gains for one group mean that there are losses for others. And there's this recurring theme of conflict and power struggles, though he does acknowledge the possibility of what he describes are powerless or disadvantaged groups coalescing to successfully promote their agendas. So I do admit I was feeling a little dispirited with the way this chapter began, because Birkeland does acknowledge that the agenda setting process is often a source of mistrust for the government. This is a part of the policy process that can breed conspiracy theories or the concept of hidden agendas. However, I felt that his discussion of the social construct of problems, as well as the media's role in agenda setting, have the biggest implications for the public administration field. So I was very excited to dig into our other texts, which each explore these topics in more depth. So the Tan and Weaver article really drives home a point made by Birkeland with his September 11th case study, which is that we shouldn't ignore how much power the media has in influencing our agendas. The article breaks it down on a state level and concludes that, yes, there is a positive relationship between the newspaper agenda and the public agenda. But they also study the added element of political culture. In this case, moralistic versus individualistic. So context matters. It's another element to be cognizant of, along with one's relationship to the media. So the Deborah Stone article was my favorite writing from this week. Birkeland introduces us to the concept of problems, which there is a conceivable solution, and conditions, things which are completely out of our control and to which there is no solution. So the Stone text really goes into this on a much more nuanced level, and she makes us question the way in which we frame our world. She describes the natural world in which humankind has no control, and the social world in which there are, problems with solutions. And those definitions can kind of change and morph depending on who is telling the story. So Table 1 in her text is a great graphic that puts the policy process kind of in the lens of two easy-to-understand concepts, and that is actions and consequences. However, what I really enjoyed about this article was that, of course, it is not that simple. She introduces this moral element to the policy process that shows just how complex the struggle for agenda setting can be. She goes on to give some examples of issues that some view as conditions, but that others see as a result of purposeful actions that can be influenced by our laws or regulations. So the other one of my discussion questions, it relates to this piece of our reading. I'd like for us to present some current policy issues that can simultaneously be viewed as conditions and problems, the results of human actions that we can influence and change through policy. So think along the lines of her example about drunk driving or the chemical leak at Union Carbide. And you can use her table and her vocab to illustrate your point and how different groups might interpret the same phenomena in very contrasting manners. So the implications for us and others in the field is really to be mindful of the tool that we use to drive agenda setting, and that's our words. Stone very simply describes this as storytelling. Birkeland also echoes this when he presents the idea that the groups that successfully define the problem will also be the ones who define the solution and therefore win in the policy debate. So they both talk about the use of symbols and how their power is derived from the meaning that we imbue them with and the context that we place them in. So I think that if we walk away with one thing this week, it's the axiom that what you say and how you say it matters. This is a space in which even scholars and researchers admit that rhetoric and storytelling will often prevail over facts and logic. This can be hard to grapple with, but I think that the words we use really do have an impact. So I want to close with an idea that Birkeland presents that I think is now being challenged. In figure 6.1, he presents levels of the agenda, and he indicates that while there is this universe, this bigger level in which there's all these conceivable agendas, that there's certain things that will never move to the next level because they are not acceptable or they're off limits or taboo. This text was published very recently in 2016, but I think that 2017 has showed us that the words that we use and the words that our leaders use can alter what is acceptable and what moves between those levels. The text talks about fringe groups or extreme groups that would never move through those levels, but I think we're seeing a change in that. So I think this is indicative of, while policy agenda setting can be perceived as this esoteric piece of political science, it clearly has an impact on our lives, and there's a lot to be gained, and conversely a lot of consequences depending on the story being told. So take care, have a great week, and I look forward to the discussion.